8 weeks ago, I announced that my administration could provide $10,000 in debt relief to everyone, and then who has that much debt, or up to that much debt, and 20 grand if you received a Pell Grant and your income was under $125,000. It's a plan for people who took out federal student loans before July of this year. And a few days ago, I launched an online application process where you can apply for that debt relief. So folks, one of the things I wanted to make sure is we didn't end up where we're in a position that Barack and I are in terms of the Affordable Care Act. It was made a little bit more difficult.
A new round of stimulus could be on the way for many Americans, everybody. Now, this new bill could guarantee low-income households with monthly stimulus payments. As long as they qualify, eligible people could receive up to $1,200 in extra relief. Now, this is awesome news. And according to the Washington Post, Democratic and Republican lawmakers have held early discussions about a new round of crisis relief stimulus spending. A bill for a guaranteed income program proposed by progressive Democrats in Congress is calling for ongoing $1,200 monthly stimulus checks for adults, plus $600 for each child in the household. The program, called the Support Act, which was introduced in the U.S. by Minnesota Democratic Representatives Elon Omar and co-sponsored by Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Cori Bush. Omar said in a news release about this bill, "For too long we have prioritized endless growth while millions of people are homeless, hungry, or without health care. The crisis has laid bare these inequalities, and we have the ability to make sure everyone has their needs met." The legislation would set up a $2.5 billion grant fund that would pay for the pilot program. It would pay $1,200 monthly for adults and $600 monthly for each child in the home. Different communities would be involved in the pilot program for the first 5 years, and then the program would become available to everybody who qualifies. According to the proposed legislation, single filing adults with AGI's income of up to $75 grand and jointly filing adults with incomes of up to $150,000, and those filing as head of household with an income of up to $112,000 would be eligible for the maximum amount monthly. Now, a family of 4 or 2 children being younger than age 18 and a yearly income under $150 grand would be eligible for $3,600 a month. Now, the U.S. job market remained tight last month as employers struggled to find people to hire. The Labor Department said that the United States businesses added 390,000 jobs in May as the unemployment rate held steady at 3.6%. Job gains for March and April were revised, down by a total of 22,000 jobs. The demand for labor has also left employers hoping that older workers who left the workforce early in the crisis will come out of retirement, especially after the recent drop in the stock market put a dent in the 401ks. The number of workers ages 55 and older grew last month by 181,000. The labor force also grew by 330,000 workers last month, not keeping up the pace with hiring. In order to attract scarce workers, employers have been offering more flexible schedules, hourly benefits, and higher wages. Average hourly wages in May were 5.2% higher than a year ago, a slight moderation from the month before. But even those bigger paychecks are not keeping pace with rising prices. The Fed is concerned that rising wages could fuel stubbornly high inflation. At 8.3% in May, inflation is already near a 4-decade high, and the central bank has begun raising interest rates aggressively in an effort to regain control over prices. The Fed has raised the rates by half percentage point in early May, and 2 more similar-sized rate hikes are expected in June and July. The former Treasury Secretary is skeptical the Fed can curb inflation without causing a recession and the higher unemployment that comes with it. He said during an interview this week, "I don't think that there's a durable reduction in inflation without a meaningful reduction in wage growth."
Let me start just by making certain that I tell you something that I think I need to say on behalf of Kansans. I've never seen the level of anxiety, uncertainty, concern for the future as I see today when I have conversations with folks in my neighborhood and across Kansas. There's a sense that something's not right. Inflation is a significant component of that feeling, and the inability to know what's around the corner is terribly damaging to folks, both financially but also mentally or psychologically. There's a real circumstance out there that I want you as the chairman and your colleagues to know exists. It is, I think, uncertainty and what the future holds is one of the most damaging things when people try to figure out their lives and how comfortable they are. I also want to highlight a particular Kansas, but middle America, across the country, issue of agriculture. I was on a farm on Saturday, participating in, observing harvest of wheat. We live in a world in which people are starving and more are going to starve if we are unable to, if we fail to get more grain into markets from Ukraine and from Russia, but from the United States as well. Agriculture, farming is a noble calling, and it has a lot to do with being able to feed people who are now desperate. Part of the concern in regard to agriculture is the interest rates have a significant consequence to the profitability, to the survivability of producers, and profit margins get squeezed if interest rates continue to climb. We face declining or lower land values. That creates greater access to credit challenges. Tell me how you see, one, how I can assure my Kansans that and Americans that things are going to be better, and two, how can I assure farmers and ranchers that their future will be brighter based upon the activities of the Federal Reserve?
So I take the sort of very low confidence readings that we're reading about and your comments about Kansas citizens as being pretty directly related to high inflation. And I think people haven't seen it. You know, most people, you and I, are old enough to remember what it was like, and it's it's something that it just really does destroy public confidence in the economy and that kind of thing. So we need to get inflation back down to 2%, and all I can say is we're using our tools to do that, and the public should believe that we will get inflation back down to 2% over time. Again, there are factors that we don't control, but those factors do tend to wash out over time. Things like commodity prices don't tend to just keep going up. They may remain high, but they're quite volatile over time. That's what the record shows. So we're doing what we can to get inflation down, the parts that we can address. So for whatever that's worth, that's what we can do and what we will do. In terms of the agricultural patch, as you know, we have, including your Kansas City Fed president, we have some terrific people who are Reserve Bank presidents who give us a good sense of what's going on in the agricultural sector on an ongoing basis. And it's obviously a very, very difficult time with fertilizer prices and difficulty in getting all kinds of inputs. And it's just a very challenging time in the agricultural world. We do understand that. Our part of it is to do what we can to get inflation back under control. I know higher interest rates are painful, but that's the tool we have to moderate demand and get demand and supply back into balance so that inflation can come down.
Mr. Chairman, in a conversation you and I had on the phone, you indicated that, as you did today, there are certain aspects of inflation that you have little control over. One of them, I think you mentioned, was energy. Let me be reassured, if you would, that there will not be actions by the Federal Reserve to make lending to fossil fuel producers a component of the policies of the Federal Reserve. When you say you have little to do with it, you could cause great damage if you decide to go down a path that was at least contemplated by